So there we go. So recording, we had a very good conversation for the first hour of class, hour and 15 minutes. Causing all kind of havoc. I'm going to have them take my laptop and ship it back to Dell so they can figure out if it's the motherboard, video card, what's going on with it.
This is your laptop, the one that's been crashing.
Yeah.
Is a school computer.
Yes. So I took the hard drive out and put another hard drive in. It's still cracked. I can't even get Windows to load the installer.
You were trying to get to the second set of RAM.
Yeah, I did all the RAM changes out. And then I finally decided to try to load and reinstall Windows on a new drive, and the Windows installer won't. It'll blue screen. And the hardware diagnostic kept saying everything was fine, but the last time I ran it, the hardware diagnostic froze and then rebooted. It didn't give an error, it just rebooted the system. So I'm like, that's motherboard processor problem, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so Active Directory uses in computers is started up. Let's go to our sales department first. Groups. So far, when we've set permission, I've always said make sure you see the double faces, right? If you see the single face, it's probably not set correctly because you rarely, I mean, there's circumstances where you use users, but you try to avoid it at all costs. Even if there's just one person in a position, like there's only one principal, you don't set the principal's user account access to the principal folders and stuff. You create a group for principal. That way, when he gets run off and another one's in place, all you have to do is put the other principal in that account. Or maybe he's on vacation for a couple of weeks and somebody's an acting principal. You can just add another account to the principal group and boom, he's got rights to everything. As long as you use the group to assign the permissions to. Let's create a group. There's a quick link button and when you have sales highlighted, the double faces, double bust, and new group wizard comes up. You're likely you're not going to mess with distribution group. Probably never mess with distribution group in here. It deals with email. And if you have an Exchange server set up, you're likely going to use the Exchange portal interface to create the distribution groups instead of through here. So don't ever, in Active Directory, worry with the distribution group. It's only for email groups. And it has nothing to do with security. And like I said, Exchanges, they've had their own portal for decades that use that interface to create the distribution group through, not through here. So the only thing you got to ever worry with is the group scope. And probably almost most of the time, you're just going to be worrying with global group. It's designed to house user accounts. The global groups are designed to organize user accounts. Y'all got that? The domain local group is used to organize global groups for the local domain. Local groups can also organize universal groups. So you can put universal groups, global groups, both into them.
So you create a group to put other groups in.
Yeah. The domain local groups, I really only utilize the pre-built ones. I typically don't create domain local groups for anything. Multi-domain environments, sort of like we have at ASU Jonesboro, it might be needed for a few instances where you'd have a local group, but normally not. But the domain local groups, like the administrator's local group, is utilized. And it works very similar to a local group on a workstation. So each workstation has an administrator's group that the main admin's global group is placed into. The domain controllers, same way. They've got an administrator's domain local group that the domain admins is placed into. So, and that group is hard-coded rights. That's the way Microsoft does it. For simplicity, I typically only use global groups. Getting the extra layer of trying to combine domain, local, and global together normally gets too complicated. Universal groups. You can put users in them, but don't. Because user membership has to be replicated to all forest-wide. And user membership is normally changes quite often. So you don't want to use universal groups because it would have to do constant replications globally, which is not very cool. So universal groups, they are designed to organize global groups. That's their main purpose, is to organize global groups together. So you have a Disney corporation that owns everybody. And everybody, all the hundreds of companies that they own have like a finance department. And they all need to share information back to the parent company, Disney, so they can file with the SEC and all of that. So in each of the domains, they organize the users in global groups, probably like global finance groups. And then they have one group called enterprise finance. It's a universal group. They put all those domain local, the global groups that are used to organize users in a particular domain. So all the groups for the finance people and all the domains are put into one enterprise universal group. And then it can be given rights to stuff. And everybody in all the those finance groups in each domain would have access to whatever the universal group was given permission to. That gets big. And it's hopefully you don't get in too many multi-domain environments like that, because trying to nest the groups together is a hard thing to think about. In this class, we're working on a single domain, which is pretty common. So we're only going to use global groups. We're not going to deal with the other two. There are some other good YouTube videos that have some good graphics on how to implement all three groups. And it would help you visualize if you get into a multi-domain environment. But that's probably going to be hopefully kind of rare. You're probably only going to be in a single domain and dealing with these global groups. So let's go ahead and create a global group here. I like to use the keyword domain because most of Microsoft global groups start with the word domain. Most of Microsoft universal groups start with the word enterprise. And most of the domain local groups are just simply a single name. So I like to follow the same naming scheme. Notice I said most, not all. Microsoft did not follow the naming convention all the way through. Some of it may be because of groups that were created back in Windows NT 3.1 back in 1992, leftovers from way back then, still around. But so we're going to create domain sales. I'll go and hit OK. Cool. That was hard. If I look at the group by double clicking on it, the members, there's nobody a member of it. The group can also be a member of other groups. Try to avoid group nesting if possible. So to put all the users into domain sales, I could highlight them all And I find the easiest route is simply to highlight them and then right click and use the add to group function. Searching for the group to add them to, typing the word domain. And you can use check name after that point and see all of the global groups, at least all of them starts with the word domain that you could add them to. And I found sales. You can also see the other 5 up there that Microsoft has pre-created that are global groups. So once they're added, if I look at the group, they're in there. I could have hit add and individually added the users one at a time. I could have double clicked the user account, clicked member of, and clicked add and added the group there.
Ooh, hold on, I got a question.
So lots of places you can add. What's your question?
I did the add to group. Am I supposed to go to a different server location or?
No, just it's already underlined. You just click OK.
Oh,
Or you could write PowerShell script, or
Okay.
even a command prompt command, old command batch files and add them in there. There's all kind of different ways to do that. Ta-da!
Seems like the easiest would be just to highlight the ones you want in there.
That's the way I do it. I highlight them. Let's create another group. Main sales manager. In sales again. We'll add Jane Doe as a sales manager. So there's a couple of ways to handle this situation where you have a supervisory position and then you got all your other subordinate employees. So we've got a group specifically for manager because maybe they need write access to folders and salespeople need read access to folders. So we have this domain sales manager group that we could assign write access to, which Jane Doe would give that permission. We also have sales here. And even though Jane Doe is a sales manager, you might not want to leave it like that, because what if there's a folder that the domain sales manager and domain sales both needed rights to, and you just set domain sales thinking that includes everybody, and you forgot to add domain sales manager as read only to the folder too. So that would leave Jane Doe possibly out of the loop. So situations like this, you can do one of 2 ways. The base group, go ahead and have the managers in the base group and the manager group. Or if you're setting it up, you could also add in the domain sales manager group. That way, if you put anybody in domain sales, maybe another manager is hired in the future, you create them account, put them in domain sales, and you forget to put them in domain sales, they're still automatically given rights So if I assign domain sales permission to a file, John Doe and anybody in domain sales managers also gets rights to that file. So I normally like to do it that way, because the manager, I would think, should always have access at least to the same thing that the regular people have access to. And then the manager's got a separate group in case you needed to add permission specifically to him. So either one of those two ways would be correct. And you're going to have to know how to do this, because your boss and HR people may not, they won't know exactly how you're supposed to add people to groups. It's like, here's the only sale, these are the managers only, these are the workers only. Like, okay, I'm just going to set it up like this though. So I hope that makes sense, why you might want to do that if you have managers and regular people. Okay, with that set up, let's go create some folders and simulate. Let's create a folder for sales reports. So we'll create a new share. On server 3, on E drive. And we'll name it sales reports. You can't use spaces in share names, so I used an underscore. I'll move my encryption checkbox in the right spot. Remove the check in the right spot. On the permissions tab, we're wanting to allow the salespeople to view the reports, and we're wanting the managers to be able to create reports. But not delete them. So, and then nobody else should have access. So set the share permissions first. So on the share permissions, did you set everyone to change and add administrators as full control?
Yes.
Did I have to change the location to find administrators? And if you remember, if you try to do a different permission here, I told you that's always the answer on share. That's your open parking lot. So trying to get that ingrained in your head before we do a practice. I throw a practice out and I still have people doing something different than that. I'm like, why? Well, the practice said this. I'm like, that's not
So-
what you're trained to do.
Why would we allow everyone change access? I thought it would only be read.
That has to do with permissions.
Yeah, because that's the permission tab. Share is letting people actually make a connection. And you limit only on the permission tab. If you block everyone, then the managers would not be able to create reports if you set everyone to read.
But couldn't you just add the domain sales manager to share and give them change permission?
It would get too complicated. Something wouldn't work. Something would break in the future.
Don't think logically on that share tab. This is the way it is.
Yeah. Don't ever think logically on the share tab.
It's
This is
just
the
the way
answer.
to, I
That's-
guess.
This is
If
how
it's not this way,
you're wrong.
you have to go figure. There's been a lot of share tabs I had to fix because like these users can't do something like, well, because delete all this crap and put it to this way. And now go check the permissions tab. Like, okay, there you go. Now everybody can do what they want to. It's just trust me. If it's not that, they're gonna have issues.
Just kind of makes everything simpler.
Yep. And the main thing is everybody wants to set everybody to read only. And then they come over here and they give somebody full control and the user only has read only. So, yeah. Whichever permission is the most restrictive is the one that takes precedence. So the share is the gateway. You leave it open and you do your restrictions on the permissions tab. So preferred on this tab because if they can somehow get a hold of the hard drive, it's still protected because this is written on the NTFS file system. Versus this is only across the network. So it has a limited ability to protect.
I remember researching that now.
Okay, so on this here, I'm going to go ahead and disable inheritance and convert. And it said no one else should have access. That means removing the users. It does not mean removing the administrative groups at the top.
I have 2 admin groups up top.
It'll change when you convert
Okay.
inheritance. That'll be sales managers needs to create reports, but not delete reports from other managers. That's better. They can delete their own reports if they make a mistake. They just can't delete somebody else's. That's what create owner would allow. The sales manager creates a report, they would have full control to delete the report. But I don't want them to delete somebody else's report. So to accomplish that,
Yeah.
let's see, sales users will be the easiest thing to do first because sales users need read. Okay, so I'm going to add in domain sales. Because that's the sales users.
Mhm.
And they needed read. And that's the default that's selected is read. That's read only. Those 3 checkboxes are read only. So if you think read only, they require 3 checkboxes for read only. You need to list the folder contents and actually see the files to actually be able to read them. If there's executables in there, you need execute to actually be able to read the executable and run a program. So it requires all 3 checkboxes to have read only. So hit OK. So we got that fixed. So read and execute is read or read only or whatever you want to say. A lot of people like to uncheck and only leave read. And that can cause some issues. Sometimes you won't be able to list the contents of the folder to read the file that you need, that you're supposed to read. So read and execute. Now the sales managers need to be able to create things. So let's go and add them.
It's kind of confusing because in Linux there's read, write, and execute, like 3 separate things.
Microsoft is more granular. So domain sales managers, they need to be able to create files but not delete files. That'll allow them to create files. And actually, because they create files, they'll be the owner to be able to delete their file, but they won't be able to delete other files because we didn't check the delete right. It's delete, spelled M-O-D-I-F-Y.
That would allow them to delete others' files.
Yep. And that always reminds me of The Stand, the movie. So modify reminds me of this.
Well, my daddy always said I was a little slow on the upchuck. That's a joke. Oh, my daddy was always joking around. I got it, mister! I got it! You're just like old Albion Packalot's hired man. Tom Cullen knows what that is. M-O-O-N. That spells deaf and dumb.
M-O-O-N, that spells deaf and dumb. Everything is spelled M-O-O-N to him. So when I think about delete, I think about this show and go, delete is spelled M-O-D-I-F-Y. Now you just,
So giving them right positions allows them to delete their own.
yep.
But if you were actually to go into advanced, you can actually put delete or delete subfolders and stuff.
So if I didn't want them to be able to delete others, I would take away this creator owner right, giving them full control. So when they created it, they would only have read, write, execute on it. They would not be able to delete the document. But creator owner, if you save a file, it puts you as the owner of that file, and you have you have whatever rights are assigned to it. It could be modified. And modify is the delete right. You know, read, write, execute, and then modify only adds delete. Let's go ahead and look a little bit closer. Let's go ahead and show advanced permissions. So as we show advanced permissions, we have a delete and delete subfolders and files. So I'm going to go back to basic permissions. I'm going to put a checkbox on modify and put a checkbox on delete, meaning you could delete a file. Not necessarily delete subfolders. And full control lets you do everything, including change permission and take ownership. unless you're a regular user and you're going through the share permission and hit it, everyone change blocks this take on the change permission. It's weird, but the everyone change share permission blocks the change permission right here, which would allow changing these checkboxes on the NTFS. It's Microsoft, doesn't really make a lot of logical sense, but that's the way it is. So
if you chose special permissions, basically you could just go in there and kind of modify the advanced permissions to
yeah,
your
special
liking.
permissions are a weird combination of checks of these that don't match.
Gotcha.
Basic permissions are preset combinations. They mostly make sense. Special permissions are kind of interesting. You normally don't do special permissions because certain mix of these checkboxes would not make sense. You couldn't really do anything. So they've got these pre-check permissions here that make sense already, pre-combined. There is a way to get a special permission for you to be able to create your own file. And then you would have the creator owner full rights to that, but you wouldn't have the right permission to other people's files. So there's like an append data, meaning that you can add data to a file and save it. And then there's a write attribute, which makes you can create a blank file. So normally you can create a blank file and then add append data to it. But you can go in and do a special permission where you can create a blank file but not add data to it. And then you should inherit whatever creator owner has, which might allow you to have full control of the file. So you have 10 people putting files into the spot. They can create files, but they can't change somebody else's files. That is possible. Okay, so I'll hit OK on that. And that's those permissions. We're going to have to do some more practice. And then I'll have to give you some practice and actually grade. See if you're keeping up on all the lingo. I have to get you prepped for the job because the instructions you get from your chief information officer that has a political science degree and has no clue about anything is you got to be able to handle that. So that's what I'm going to be giving you, is trying to give you the instructions that you got to decipher and do in real world. Is every job is going to be different, but I have really good feedback from companies